Welcome back to the Champagne on Ice podcast presented by the Field of 68. It's been a nice little holiday break for Illinois hoops. Pretty slow time. Only game that Illinois had in the last 8 days is against a team that's now 0-15, one of the worst teams I've ever seen come through State Farm Center. But nice bragging rights win since we last talked to you as well. Took a nice little holiday break ourselves, but we're back. Conference play is approaching, and we've got a lot to talk about here. I am Kyle Tausk, joined as always by Mike Farmer. And Mike, how's the holiday season treating you?
It's been pretty good, yeah. Nice break from school. Couple nice wins for the Illini. I'm feeling pretty good. Glad to be back on here with you.
Real quick, before we get into basketball, let's get a quick thought on the Citrus Bowl, which is going to kick off later today once this podcast is released. Is South Carolina going to have their way with Illinois? You think Illinois can keep this one close?
As much as I'd love to see Illinois knock off a dominant SEC team, I just don't think it's happening. I hope they keep it close, but I don't see a win in the Illini future in Florida.
Illinois is 0-6 against SEC teams in football in their history, and I think it's probably going to go to 0-7. We'll see, but that South Carolina defensive line and Lenora Sellers, I think, could be a problem for Illinois. I think that one has a chance to get ugly, but let's talk some hoops here. A team that hopefully conference play does not get ugly for, as it is now approaching. Illinois is going to restart conference play with their final 18 conference games on a West Coast trip against Oregon and Washington. We're going to preview that Oregon game at the end of the show. Also, later on, want to talk about just kind of the Big Ten picture as non-conference play wraps up and where Illinois stacks up. It's really completely wide open. There seems like there's no dominant team right now, so I want to get your thoughts on some of the top contenders in the Big Ten and where Illinois stacks up with them. But before we do that, figured since it's New Year's Eve when this pod is getting released, we should do something New Year's themed on this show. So I want to give 3 New Year's resolutions for Illinois basketball heading into 2025. We each brought 3 New Year's resolutions, which can be really anything, whether it's this team, the off season, Brad Underwood, the program as a whole, whatever the case may be. Just 3 things, 3 goals, 3 things we're hoping to see in 2025. As it was a very successful 2024. There was a lot that went on, but in 2024, Illinois went to an Elite 8. They've got a guy projected in the top 5 of the NBA draft right now. They've reloaded. Good non-conference slate this year, some big wins. I'd say it was a successful 2024, but 2025, we're just going to go back and forth here. Each of us have 3 resolutions for Illinois hoops. I'll let you get started with your first one.
I'm going to start with this year's team and just something I want to see in the next 20 games or so, whatever they have left. And that's just, I don't know if it's kind of stupid to say, but some consistency from three-point range. We saw in the opening game this year, Brad Underwood's opening press conferences, the media day, all this stuff. This team's going to be a really good three-point shooting team. And we've seen flashes of it, like the Arkansas game on Thanksgiving, just a beautiful three-point performance. Even Chicago State a couple days ago, granted it's a horrible team, but really good from 3. Everybody's coming in, splashing threes left and right. But overall, the numbers on the year just are not too pretty. And for a team that's shooting at the rate they are shooting, they are, I think, 51% of their field goal attempts on the year are three-point shots, which is a top 10 rate in the country. It's a crazy rate, honestly. And at the same time, their three-point percentage on the year is kind of middle of the pack in the country. It's like 175th out of 360-something teams. So not great numbers. And I feel like it's kind of been the downfall in a couple losses, like just really poor three-point shooting performances against Alabama at the start of the year, against Tennessee. That was just a sloppy game overall. Wasn't great against Northwestern in the loss. Even in some of the wins, it's been pretty sloppy overall. And so I just think for a team that's shooting so many, I want to see either just making them more consistently or toning down the rate that they're shooting at, because I think it leads to some issues, especially when you have this just gauntlet of an 18-game Big Ten slate plus Duke at Madison Square Garden. A lot of really good defenses you're going to be going up against. So yeah, I don't know. I just think either tone it down with the rate you're shooting at or just start to make them. I do think some guys like Ben Humrickhouse, Will Riley too, guys that were hyped up as probably the best shooters on this team, some of the best shooters in this conference even. I think they will get going eventually. If that happens, I don't want to see other guys start to fall back with their shooting percentages. But yeah, I don't know. Just overall more consistency and more of a better feeling with the 3-point shooting game.
Yeah, I am totally with you on that. And I think, like you mentioned, they're really just a few particular individuals kind of having that positive regression back to what their average should be. It feels like that is on the horizon, or at least should be. You'd hope it is for Ben Rickhouse, who's now down to 34% from three on the season. I think he's 5 for his last 27 from three. That's just not who he is as a shooter. I know he's been a big point of contention, and there's some other reasons that definitely warrant that. But his 3-point shooting, I mean, it's a good shooter missing pretty good looks from three, and is just in a slump. And for him to just regress back to what he normally has been, which is a 42% shooter for his career, shot 41.4 last year at Evansville on tougher shots than he's getting at Illinois, to just have that climb back up feels like he's due to shoot 50% for 3 weeks. Will Riley, absolutely. I mean, he's down to 36%, which actually doesn't look all that bad. He started the year shooting like 72% the first 3 weeks of the season, so that's part of it. Maybe it's just a freshman that's going to go up and down like that, but he's really scuffling. He was on a 1 for 21 stretch from three before he made a couple, or at least one, in that Chicago State game. And Kylan Boswell's another guy. He's down at 23% from three. He's a 38% career shooter in 71 games in his first 2 years at Arizona coming into this on decent volume, at least last year. 23% ridiculous. I mean, I can't explain that. He's going to go on a 55% from three spurt at some point. I feel like maybe I'm wrong and I'll just shoot 23% all year, but just getting those guys back to what their career averages are feels like a good goal. But I'll go something. Can be this year's team, can be next year's team. Whoever accomplishes it, just do it before 2025 is over. And I know you mentioned this on one of the previous episodes. One of my New Year's resolutions is win a marquee home game at the State Farm Center. Feels like Illinois has missed so many of those chances here recently, whether it was that Tennessee game. You look last year, you had Marquette come in the non-con. You had a big game that was hyped up. The Orange Crush Line lined up at like 7 a.m. against Purdue late in the season in March. Illinois loses that game. I'm sure there was other ones there. You even go back to like that Arizona home and home. You don't get that one. I'm sure there's other ones in conference play. You had a top 10 Maryland team come in with that Big Ten title team that I remember that was hyped up. Illinois loses that game. Illinois is just due, whether it's conference play this year. I don't know necessarily which team in this year's Big Ten you would consider a marquee win. Maybe that opportunity won't come for the rest of this year, and it'll have to happen in non-conference play next year. I mean, Purdue, that game to close the regular season, I think Purdue's got some issues, but they'll still probably be a ranked team. I know Maryland comes in 3 weeks from now, and they're climbing. I don't know if you'd consider that marquee. I mean, UCLA comes in, and they're a team in the top 15 now. I guess that would count, but really just these ranked home games against marquee opponents, Illinois' got to win at least one of those. I don't think that's too much to ask in 2025 is when you get an opportunity against an elite team. Because if it doesn't happen in conference play this year, I know Brett Underwood's going to bring one in non-conference play next year. Absolutely. And if they do, I want Illinois to win that game for once.
Please, man. Yeah, I'm excited to see if we get another home and home going next year, the next 2 years. That's a good point, though, for sure. I was going to kind of talk about like something related to that when we talked about the Big Ten, because Illinois has kind of a weird home and away split with the schedule this year. Like there's a lot of decent matchups at home and a lot of the kind of crappier opponents on the road this year. My second New Year's resolution, I'm going with another point about this year's team for the next 20 games. I want to see Thomas Slavovicic just get involved more. I'm talking offensively, of course. Involved more as a scorer. I mean, just overall in general. As a scorer, I want to see him distribute more, and I want to see him late in games because KJ's been that guy late in games pretty much the whole year where it's KJ making a 3 or bust. And I think Tomislav could be just a really good piece in the final 8 or so minutes of every game because he's great for the first 30 minutes of the game. And then it feels like Illinois just as a whole kind of abandons the low post, and Tomislav in the paint for whatever reason. Guys just kind of get rushed and they take their threes and everything. other teams are forcing turnovers. But I just think when the ball is in Ivicic's hands, good things happen 80% of the time, 90% of the time, whether it's him passing, finding a cutter, finding an open shooter in the corner, which is a super high percentage look that could get guys like Ben and Will going again. Whether it's doing that, a little baby hook, his touch in the paint has just been phenomenal for most of the year. So I think it unlocks just a whole new level of this offense that's kind of been falling off a little bit in the past few weeks as the competition level has risen up. But yeah, I just think he's such a dynamic piece. I mean, he's massive. He's 7'2". He's a matchup problem for pretty much every team we're going to play the rest of the year and the teams that we've played previously. So I just think he's such a dynamic piece. And I think he's somebody that could be a safety valve late in games and somebody that you can lean on early in games. And I just think he needs to be involved more in general.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I also would add, I think Illinois needs to utilize his playmaking a little bit more because
Please.
he's a really good passer, and we've seen that. I'd love to just play through him at times a little bit more, especially if teams are going to try to take away some of Illinois' ball screen stuff, and you want to take some of the burden off of KJ in terms of creating. Now, I think Kylan's done a really nice job of that recently, but if you want to just go away from your backcourt in general, maybe you're playing a team that's got two really good perimeter defenders or teams that are really going to come up and hedge on some of those screens. Maybe you shift and you play through Tommy a little bit more, whether you put him in like a zoom action to allow him to kind of be a playmaker. You just put him in the middle of the floor and allow guys to move off the ball, him to use his vision. Teams are going to have to respect his jump shot. So if you play him at the top of the key at the 3-point line, but as a passer, and you bring that big away from the rim, and all of a sudden maybe Trey White's cutting to the basket, or you allow KJ to make something happen off the ball, run off ball action to get him a shot so he doesn't have to create everything for himself and just use his passing ability and his vision. I think Illinois could get creative with that and really use him. And we saw them do some different things with Coleman Hawkins in terms of playing through him offensively, especially 2 years ago. And I think you could do some similar things with Tommy because, I mean, he's a great shooter and a guy who can really pass it. It's a tough guy to guard if you're going to really try to use him more than just in pick and pops and more than just in the low post. I do agree, though. I think he can be a guy that is involved a little bit more, even if it's just scoring the ball. I mean, look, Chicago State's terrible, but you saw how easy it was for him in that game early. They just kept pounding it to him. There's going to be some matchups. I mean, it's not going to be Derek Queen of Maryland or Michigan's front court, but especially some lower level teams. I mean, there's going to be front courts that have no answer for him. Just find him, feed him. Totally agree with that. Let's see. I'll keep this one simple because this is an easy and obvious one, but I think this would go a long way for Illinois. 2025 New Year's resolution. How about 2 consecutive second weekend appearances for this Illinois basketball program? Actually start a streak.
That's pushing it, man.
Done with the 19-year drought. How about 2 in a row? How great would that feel if Illinois could make that happen? I think this team is more than capable of doing that. I don't want to set the bar at Final Four because I think that's pushing it a little bit. I think a young team like this, to put that expectation on them, while I would love to just say New Year's resolution, go win the national title, let's keep things a little realistic here and say, hey, another second weekend appearance for this program, back-to-back second weekend teams, especially the incredible feat that would be with everything Illinois lost. I mean, let's get Brad Underwood his first freaking Coach of the Year award or some type of award. He hasn't won anything at Illinois, and it's ridiculous. How about a second weekend appearance or a Big Ten title or something? I'll set the bar at let's just get back to the Sweet 16 for the second year in a row, which I think would be absolutely incredible for this program, and all the momentum would be here with Illinois and a team that I think can continue to build on that next year with what they could have coming back. More on that in my third resolution. But let's keep this one very simple and say another second weekend appearance for Illinois in 2025.
Yeah, I would love it, man, because I mean, this program has been so straight up dominant in the Big Ten for the past past half decade since 2020-ish. But then the national results just haven't really been there. There's still some skeptics on Brad Underwood, still some doubters of the program nationally, which leads me to my third point a little bit. My third point is just overall kind of directed at the fan base, which I love. I love the Illinois fan base. It's a crazy fan base, super passionate, great fans overall. They travel. I mean, they're in the Citrus Bowl. Like, I mean, it's a orange out in Florida, pretty much. Sell out every basketball home game. But I just want to preach like patience, not only with this team, because everybody can see this is a team with 10 newcomers, tons of guys that are freshmen, tons of guys that have never played college ball, a coach that's trying to put together a new system, build a system around players that appeared in Champaign in June of this year. So I'm just preaching patience in general. Like, yeah, Ben Hummerkaus has been pretty flat out terrible the past couple games. But guess what? He's going to be here for 1 year. He has like 20, 25 games left in his Illinois career. And I personally still think he's going to be a pretty good player for this team as the season goes on. So let's hold back on calling Ben Hummerkaus a bum on Twitter and like being in his mentions. Let's relax on yelling at Brad Underwood after one loss about his in-game lack of in-game adjustments. The dude's won like he should have two Big Ten Coach of the Years. He's won Big Ten titles, Big Ten tournament titles, might go back-to-back Sweet 16s this year. Like he's a proven really good coach. It's a really good program with an AD that's amazing, phenomenal assistant coaching staff. The players love Brad Underwood. They come back, they're getting their jerseys retired, coming back to games and practices. Let's relax on just calling Brad Underwood a fraud every single time Illinois loses a game by 2 points on the road to a top 10 team in the country, which could happen in a couple days against Oregon. It doesn't matter. Let's just enjoy the ride with this, especially with this team, because it's a young team that's probably going to get better as the season progresses. I wasn't trying to sound too rude and be super angry at anybody because I do love the fan base. Let's just relax, enjoy the ride, please. You lost that game at Penn State last year. Everybody acted like the world was falling. All of a sudden, you're in Boston at the Elite Eight, cheering the team on. Like, enjoy the ride, please.
That's a fantastic resolution. I'd narrow it to this. Can we go one loss in 2025 without there being a faction of people on social media that want to get rid of Brad Underwood? Like, can we just one loss? I mean, all I'm asking for is one time Illinois loses a close game and we don't see anything that is, there's just some ridiculous stuff. I mean, the Northwestern Tennessee game, look, did Brad Underwood make some mistakes in those games that he self-admitted? Yes. Is Brad Underwood a top 2 coach in the history of Illinois basketball, up there with Lou Henson? Yes, he's proven that so far, completely turned the program around, and he knows how to coach basketball. He's got a heck of a roster, and that's a good resolution. Didn't think of that, but I like that one. That's one that would very much please me because there's just a constant headache after some of these losses, some of the things you see. Of course, every fan base has it, and everybody's emotional after some tough losses like that. Obviously, you understand that. But my third resolution, off-season related, but how about some roster continuity into next year for Illinois? After turning over your entire roster, bringing back 2 returners, one of whom is redshirting now, and bringing 10 new guys. Obviously, Illinois is going to be active in the portal. They're going to be active wherever they can find upgrades on the roster. But how about some roster continuity heading into next year? Because, Kasparis Yakachonis is going to go to the NBA draft. Everybody else on Illinois has at least some type of realistic opportunity to come back for next year, including, I know you mentioned earlier, actually, Ben Hummerkaus now has another year of eligibility thanks to this Diego Pavia NCAA lawsuit that is taking away NCAA years of eligibility. So a guy like Ben Hummerkaus, who played 3 years at NAIA, actually could come back next year. We'll see. That should be a
I
nice,
didn't even know that. Wow.
Be a nice discussion point. I'm sure every Illinois fan will handle that possibility rationally with Ben Hummerkaus come back. Hey, I'd take the guy. He's a good shooter. Does he have to start and play 35 minutes? No, but that opportunity is there. But Will Riley's a guy, I think, he's struggled recently. I think it's become more likely, surely, than it was before the season that maybe he could benefit from a second year of college. I'd still venture to say he's going to go to the NBA draft. I think he's going to break out of this shooting slump. He's a guy who's shown anything you want to see from an 18-year-old scoring wing, elite at getting to his spots, elite shooter. At least the traits have been there. I still think he probably goes, but maybe you piece together an NIL package for him, but really just some of these other complementary pieces. Kylan Boswell, I think, will be back for his senior year. Trey White, I think you get him back for his senior year, at least you would hope to. Can you get both your big men back, Tomislav Ivisic and Morez Johnson? Dear God, don't lose Morez Johnson. Do everything you can to make sure that guy comes back, because I think he's going to be an absolute monster and have an unbelievable career. But you get those two back, and you've got a front court that I think enters next year probably the best in the conference. I'd be shocked if there was a better one, especially knowing that Derek Queen's gone probably as a one and done. And Michigan's guys are out of eligibility, I believe. But just some roster continuity. Brad Underwood's going to add transfers. Illinois is going to piece some guys together, and it's also unrealistic to expect that everybody that can come back will come back. Guys are going to leave. It's going to happen, but maybe more than half of this roster, is that unrealistic to say, hey, how about more than 50% of this roster returns for next year, and then you piece together maybe 3-4 pieces around that and really have some continuity enter next year with some high expectations? I think that's a realistic resolution.
I would love to see it, dude. I mean, just start with Boswell and Big T, two guys that are probables to come back at this point, I'd probably say. I'm not in the locker room, obviously, but you start with those two guys alone. That's a pretty good start for a roster. Throw in Morez, Trey White, Ben Hummerkaus. I didn't even know about the eligibility thing. And then he's going to get great transfers. A couple talented freshmen coming in next year. I don't know too much about them, honestly, but yeah, continuity would be great. You see guys like, it's so rare to see a guy like Luke Goody play 3 years and just become a fan favorite. Like, a guy like that leaves after 1 year. The Illinois fans kind of forget about him. He stays for 3 years. Half the fan base has his jerseys, beloved in the entire fan base. He goes to Indiana, and there's like not really any hard feelings. Guy like Coleman stays here for 4 years, totally beloved in the fan base. Like, you just don't see a ton of that in college basketball anymore, especially at Illinois recently. So yeah, I'm with you. That would be great to see.
All right, let's talk some Big Ten hoops here. Conference play is restarting. I never know how to say it, because I don't want to say conference play starting, because it already did start. Illinois already played 2 conference games. Restarting, I guess. The heart of conference play is approaching, the final 18 out of 20 games after that little 2-game appetizer in early December. But conference play is here, and I've gotten a chance to see a handful of Big Ten teams pretty closely. Not everybody, obviously 17 other teams now to monitor, but there's at least time now after non-conference play. We've got plenty of data, have an idea of which teams are probably going to be the contenders for the Big Ten title, which teams probably will not be. And this year it's wide open. I mean, there is not one team that I think anybody could circle and say that is my absolute, no doubt favorite to win the Big Ten. And I would not be surprised if the Big Ten is bunched up with 5 or 6 teams within a game or 2 of each other at the end of the year, similar to that 2019-20 season when you had that 3-way tie with Maryland, Michigan State, Wisconsin. Then you had Illinois and Iowa right behind them at 14-6 and 13-7. I think that's kind of where we're probably headed in this year's version of the league. But I just want to kind of talk a little bit through this just to see how we're both feeling about Illinois as it relates to the Big Ten title chances, just which teams maybe you're the most scared of in the Big Ten so far based on what you've seen, which teams maybe you're not buying into too much. We can kind of just throw some names out there, but I'll just kind of leave it open-ended for you. Where do you want to go with this? I'll start with this. Is there one team that's impressed you more than any others, not including Illinois so far in the Big Ten?
I want to say no, but based on the resume, I'd say Oregon and UCLA both have some pretty good wins. UCLA just knocked off Gonzaga. Oregon beat Alabama and Texas A&M in a stretch of 4 days in that tournament earlier this year. I think those are pretty good teams, but yeah, I'm just, if you thought the Big Ten was a jumbled mess with 14 teams, it's so much worse with 18. It's almost unbelievable to look at the quality of I think there's 10 teams that could be in contention for a double bye in the Big Ten tournament come mid-March. It's unbelievable. But on paper, I really don't think there's a team that's my clear number one. I don't really want to put Illinois at number one, but I'm also just confused. I have opinions, but I don't even know. I'll let you go first. Who do you got at your top?
Yeah, I don't really have a great answer either. I'll start by just saying, looking at Ken Palm here, you have 8 Big Ten teams in the top 30 and 5 in the top 20. The top team right now by one spot at number 11 is Michigan at 10-3, followed very closely by number 12, Oregon, 13, UCLA. Then you go down to 18, Illinois, one spot behind them, 19, Maryland. Go down a little bit, 23rd, Michigan State. Then you have 27, Purdue, 28, Ohio State, still in the top 30. Not sure I totally agree with that one, but they have been hurt a little bit. And then you have Wisconsin at 32, Penn State at 36, Nebraska at 40. So that's 11 teams right there in the top 40 in an 18-team league. Iowa's not far behind. Northwestern's not far behind. It's totally bunched up. I think for me, I think there's a group of teams that I would consider the Big Ten title threats. And there's a pretty distinct cutoff for me in terms of where I would kind of draw that line. I think Michigan, Oregon, UCLA, Illinois, Maryland, Michigan State, and I would still throw Purdue in there. That's kind of my group of teams that I would say I would not be shocked if they won the conference title. And then I kind of cut it off and say, I don't think I could see Ohio State doing it. Definitely don't think I could see Wisconsin doing it. Penn State, no. I think they'll probably make the tournament this year. They're not going to compete for a conference championship. Nebraska, no. Iowa, no. Northwestern, no. And then you get to like your Washingtons, Indiana, hell no. No thanks on Indiana. So that's kind of, would you agree with kind of that grouping in terms of, is there anyone else you would add, or is there anyone you would take away from that group that you're saying, no, I'd be pretty surprised?
So you had like a top 7 with OSU 8th, right?
I think I had 7, yeah. Is that right? Purdue, Michigan State, Illinois, Maryland. Yeah, 7. Michigan, Oregon, UCLA, 7.
I like that top 7. Yeah, I'm with you. I don't want to kick Purdue out of that group because I still think their big three of Smith, Lawyer, and TKR is, I mean, it's really damn good. The rest of the roster is, I hate personally, but with Matt Painter, with Mackie Arena, that's a good team overall. I like the top 7. If I was going to differentiate like tiers inside the top 7, I would stick Purdue kind of in that bottom tier. I'm not really sold on Michigan State yet, just based on them. They're kind of young. Their pieces haven't really been proven at a college level, and they don't really shoot threes or make threes. It is a good coach. It's a good arena. It's a talented roster, but I'd probably have Purdue 7th, Michigan State 6th, somewhere in that range. I'd go Maryland 5th, maybe. I like that roster. I mean, Queen is a beast. Julian Reese is still really good. I'm not really sold on Kevin Willard still. It's a good defensive team. I'd like to see more of them, but I think they're in double bye contention, even title contention still. Easy tournament team. So I'd have them 5th. I keep saying I'm not sold on teams, which it's kind of the truth. Like, I want to see more from teams, especially as
Are you fully
conference
sold
play
on
gets
any team? I don't know if I am.
not even Illinois.
Yeah.
As much of a homer as I am, I'm not sold on Illinois fully still. I'd probably go Michigan 4 and then have like a top 3, a separated top 3. Illinois, UCLA, Oregon in some order. Oregon and UCLA are 2 teams that are like, they're just team. It's like a roster of like 8 players that are just really solid. They don't really have stars. Both teams could win the conference and probably not have an all Big Ten first team player. Like, it's just their depth is what carries them. Good coaching, good arenas, good defense. Like, so I'd probably have the 2 former Pac-12 teams in Illinois and a tier at the top. I know Illinois is unproven, but I want to put them up there just based on talent and some of the things we've seen so far, the flashes we've seen. So those 3, probably Michigan and Maryland, 4 and 5 in a tier, and then 6 and 7, Michigan State and Purdue, I think I said. So that's kind of where I'm at. It could change by tomorrow. It's so jumbled. It's a complete mess.
I think I would throw Maryland in the top tier. I think I'm buying into Maryland. I like this Maryland team. Their biggest issue last year, what held them back so much, was that they could not score the basketball, and they were one of the worst shooting teams in the country. And this year, they're a top 40 offense, and they're shooting 37% from 3 as a team. So they've fixed their biggest issue. Derek Queen is a monster. I think he's an all Big Ten probably first or second team guy as a freshman is going to go in the lottery of the draft. I think that's just a monster that teams are going to have a hard time dealing with. But I don't hate their guards either. Jacoby Gillespie's come in and played really well, shot 43% from three, and they've just added shooting around that front court. I had questions about playing two bigs together like that, neither of whom are really perimeter threats. How's that going to work? I think the only way it works is if you have good guard play and great shooting around both of them, and Maryland has that this year. And they've been just destroying teams so far. They went to Mackey Arena and probably should have won that game. They were darn close to doing it. At home against a good Marquette team, they led for like 32 minutes and just kind of choked it away. I know they haven't beaten anybody yet, but I think I would throw them in that mix. I trust them as much as I trust UCLA and Oregon, I think, right now. Really Illinois, too. That's the thing. I think there's no like true number one favorite to me. I couldn't stamp my flag into one team and say, hey, I'm buying this team as the favorite in the conference. It's just, I think every team has some type of question marks. Like UCLA, they've been impressive. They just beat Gonzaga over the weekend. They're not that good offensively. Some of their games, you turn them on. I mean, they played a 55-54, 56-55 game against Arizona that they should not have won. They're 57-54. They had like 36 points with 8 minutes left in that game and then had a furious rally the final 8 minutes where Arizona couldn't score. And they're outside the top 60 in offense. Sky Clark's a starter for them. No thanks on a
Not
Sky Clark starting team winning a high major conference. No thanks on that one. I'll have to see that to believe it. They are good, though. That'll be a fun game when they come to Champaign. Oregon has the best resume by far. I think CBS or Fox has them as a 1 seed in the NCAA tournament right now. They're the highest net team in the conference right now, I think, 12-1, top 10 in the AP poll. Had a great tournament in that Players Era Festival where they beat Alabama. But I still feel like, and we'll get into that when we preview Illinois, Oregon, there's nothing like that they do at an elite level. They're just solid. Can a team that's just steady and solid win the Big Ten? Maybe this year's the year that a team could do that. There's nothing that jumps off at me from Oregon as like, this is the reason that they're going to win the Big Ten conference. There's nothing that they do at a spectacular level, and maybe that doesn't matter. But that, I don't know. Michigan, I feel like, is that one team that they're just very up and down. Like, can you trust them over a full 20-game slate to finish number one in the league? They've already just been so up and down shooting the ball. They just made 19 threes against Western Kentucky on Sunday, which is like a program record. And then you'll see them against Wake Forest shoot like 2 for 26 from three. That big man pick and roll with Danny Wolf and Vlad Golden is tough to guard, but I don't know. I'm not fully sold on them, and then Illinois is just so young, and if they're not going to shoot it as well as Illinois has, I don't know if I'd be that confident in Illinois being the favorite. I'd need to see them actually shoot the three better because that's how their offense is built. If they're going to shoot 33% from three, I don't think that's a conference title winner. So it's tough. I do think that group, I would agree with you that I'd have Michigan State and Purdue probably the bottom two of that group. I wouldn't be absolutely stunned if either of those teams won the conference, but I would probably have the least confidence in both of them. I think I would throw Maryland in that other group, though. I'm kind of buying the Terps, I think.
All right. It's just like, I know you talked about Oregon being a potential 1 seed right now. But if you want to like forecast this come March and March Madness
seeding,
be a
1 seed in March. No
yeah,
chance.
Obviously not. But is there a team right now in the 18-team Big Ten that you can like be confident and say they're going to be a 3 seed in March? Like, I don't think so. There might be 10 Big Ten teams from like the 4 line to the 10 or 11 line. Like, it might be an unbelievable March. The bracket's going to look so weird. Obviously, things could change. We could be completely off on everything. Like, looking at it right now, there might be 10 teams from the 4 to 10 line. So it's going to be unbelievable. Even the teams we didn't mention, like, we didn't really talk about Ohio State. They probably going to make the tournament. Iowa might sneak in. Northwestern, Wisconsin. Wisconsin was like top 10 in the AP poll 3 weeks ago. So it's just crazy. The Big Ten's pretty loaded. I'm interested to see like these the All Big Ten teams, because I said like Oregon and UCLA, they're not going to have first team All Big Ten guys. Dylan Harper, Derek Queen, KJ, like it could be 3 freshmen on the first team. Braden Smith too. I don't know. It's going to be unbelievable. Going to be a really fun season to watch. One thing I'm really looking for, and I'm excited to kind of monitor as the season gets going. Travel. Like we talked about Oregon and UCLA being potential Big Ten title teams. I don't know about it. Like I'm kind of not sold on it completely. That's part of my reasoning. If they're traveling to the Midwest for half of their games in the conference, that's going to be crazy to watch. We'll see how much it actually affects them. And with the Midwest teams going to Washington and USC and UCLA, so it's going to be just a lot of storylines. It's going to be a wild season for sure. So I'm really excited for it.
I think the other thing to note, too, is the double up games. Each team plays 3 teams twice, and I think in a league like this, that could make the difference. And that's where the West Coast teams, the 2 West Coast teams that are in contention, UCLA and Oregon, have an advantage, is that the 3 teams that they play twice are their West Coast counterparts, which means that both of them get to play USC and Washington twice each, 2 of probably the bottom 4 teams in the Big Ten this year. So that's something like all you need is 1 game difference. That might cause it. UCLA already has a leg up because they went at Oregon and beat them already. And that's one where those 2 teams might have an edge there, whereas Illinois got to see Michigan State twice. I guess Wisconsin and Northwestern, I don't know how you feel about either of those, but I did solid tournament level teams. So Illinois is playing 3 tournament teams twice, or as 2 of the 3 double up games for those teams. I think Maryland's got a pretty favorable one. I think they get Nebraska and Minnesota twice as 2 of their 3. So that's something to monitor as well. But the travel will be interesting. I think it's going to work both ways, to where I think teams like Illinois that are about to go on a West Coast trip probably won't be very favorable to Maryland and Rutgers and Penn State all the way on the East Coast. Even these Midwest teams, when they go out there to the West Coast, I think those West Coast teams will have a home court advantage big time against the other teams in the conference, the traditional Big Ten, so to speak. But when they come out and they have to play 2 or 3 in a row on the East Coast, I think they're going to really struggle, and they're not going to be used to that. So I think home court advantage might actually be extra important this year, because when you're playing those West Coast teams, I think you'll even get a point or 2 more a bump, because the travel is going to be very interesting. I actually am very glad that Illinois is getting their only West Coast trip out of the way right now. It's over. January 5th, they're done. They don't have to go back to the West Coast. That's it. I think that sets up perfectly. I'm glad to just get that out of the way.
Definitely, dude. And even like Illinois going to Rutgers the past couple of years, going to Maryland, going to Penn State, even like,
Yeah.
it doesn't matter how good the team is. That's a tough travel. Like it's a tough trip. I don't know. It's going to be so fun to watch. I was talking about this earlier. Illinois' like home versus away splits for Big Ten opponents. I'm not saying it's favorable, because like there's 14 teams in the Big Ten that are pretty good and could be competing for tournament spots. But the like really tough away games I see, there's 9 left. One of them's at Oregon, and then you play at Michigan and at Michigan State. That's kind of the end of the list for tough, like super tough away games, in my opinion. I got to look at the other ones right now. But then at home, you got like home versus Purdue, home versus Michigan State. You played Wisconsin at home already. You got Maryland, Ohio State, UCLA, Iowa. Those are all home games. I think that could play out pretty well in Illinois' favor. Just something to look at if you're like, if I was to predict a Illinois Big Ten title, which I'm not going to right now. I don't even have a prediction, to be honest, but definitely something to look out for with all the travel and just this home and away stuff.
Yeah, I think theoretically Illinois' hardest game in all of conference play might be the one they're about to play on Thursday night at Oregon. When you consider the travel and the opponent, and it obviously being on the road, you get that out of the way, and then, yeah, you've got probably some of those upper tier teams in the Big Ten. Most of them you get at home, at least the ones you're going to play once. Michigan's the one you go at Michigan only, but then, yeah, UCLA, you welcome them here. You do have a double up against Michigan State, so you go to Breslin Center as well, but Maryland comes to Champaign. That's that's one that hasn't gone well for Illinois, but maybe this year's different. Hey, they broke the Brad Underwood Maryland drought last year in College Park, so maybe that curse is behind us. But yeah, that's a good point. I'll finish by just giving the Ken Pom projection here in the conference, and it kind of aligns with the groups that we had. Michigan and UCLA are its co-favorites, projected to go 14-6. followed by Michigan State and Oregon at 13-7, and then Illinois and Maryland at 12-8. It has Purdue at 11-9 with Ohio State and Penn State, then Nebraska and Iowa at 10-10. So it's lower on Purdue, and it's kind of lower on Illinois. It's got Michigan and UCLA as its top two right now in terms of conference projection. I do think it's accurate to think 14-6 is probably the record. I feel like I've kind of thought through it, and I feel like 14-6, whether it's two or three teams at 14-6 or just one team that squeaks by to 14-6, I don't think there's going to be a 15-win team in the Big Ten in conference. I think 14-6 is the record that will get you at least a share of the Big Ten title. That's just my personal prediction. Maybe somebody, really turns it on and gets to 15 or 16. I'm just not sure I see it. And I think the formula to get to 14-6, if you're Illinois, to me, and maybe you can make one tweak, a game here, a game there, but 9-1 at home, 5-5 on the road in conference. You go 14-6. I think that's the goal to shoot for. Right now, they're 1-0 at home, 0-1 on the road. You split your road games, which I think is very doable with this road schedule. Two of your road games are Washington and Minnesota. You should get two of those, and you just got to win three more. And give yourself one game of breathing room, or one game of room for error at home. Win the other 9, which is what I think a program of Illinois' caliber should do in their home arena, especially knowing you don't have a top 5 team coming in. There's your path. There it is. I think that's what the goal should be for Illinois. 14-6, I think, gets it done to me. Do you think a team gets to 15?
No, I don't think 15. And I forgot, there could pretty easily be 2 teams winning it, 3 teams winning it, just sharing the title. Could totally see that. Yeah, I think 14-6. We're 1-1 already, so 13-5 with I don't know. I still don't even know my prediction for this Oregon game. It's so up in the air. This whole thing's a mess, as I keep saying. But yeah, I think 14-6 is pretty good for the Big Ten champion. Not sold on Illinois getting there, but I could definitely see it.
All right. Before we go to Oregon, last thing. Gun to your head right now. I know you said you can't even come up with a prediction, but I'm making you right now. Gun to your head right now. What placement does Illinois finish in the Big Ten? Gut feeling.
I don't want to be the Illinois fan that's on Twitter that says they get screwed with the refs and screwed with awards and everything. I say we finish one game back. I say I'm feeling 13-7, third place, 2 teams tie for first. Illinois, 3rd seed, Big Ten tournament, double bye. Great season overall. Finishes with that could be a 5 seed in March. I don't know, but I'm feeling 13-7. Probably lose a game or two that you probably shouldn't, just based on the youngness of the roster, other factors, whatever. But yeah, I think 13-7 is pretty good. Probably 3rd place.
That's exactly what I had. I was going to say a tie for 3rd. I think they're going to finish it. If I had to give a placement, it's tied for 3rd because I think there'll be a share of the conference title, and I think Illinois' youth is going to hold them 1 game short of that and the schedule difference. I think one or both of those West Coast teams, Oregon and UCLA, will finish 14-6, partly because they get 2 games, really 4 I think should be free wins against Washington and USC. I think both those teams will win both their games against each. USC's a tougher. Oregon already beat them, but I think that'll be kind of where it is. And I just think the youth on Illinois and just already kind of the fluctuation we've seen in shooting for this Illinois team. I think 13-7 feels right to me, where you're going to win some games, some big games, and you'll probably lose a couple you shouldn't, just because I think this team has kind of a wide range of outcomes. But I pretty much exactly with you on that. I think tied for 3rd is probably where I would say, but subject to change weekly in this conference, really, to me. Let's talk about this Oregon game. It is a big-time game to kick off the restart of conference play. It'll be Illinois' 3rd Big Ten game and their first West Coast trip. They'll finish off their 2-game West Coast trip at Washington on Sunday afternoon. But this Oregon game is huge. Feels like one of these games where, look, losing at Northwestern in early December, that was a disappointing loss. It's not a loss that's going to crush you. It's a very solid Northwestern team. It's a team that could make the tournament. But Illinois should have won that game. Illinois was up 10 late in the second half. That's one you let slip away on the road. It was a very winnable road game in conference. One way to make up for that loss is going and winning a road game you probably shouldn't win. And I think traveling to Eugene, Oregon right after the new year to face a top 10 ranked Oregon team in Eugene on your first West Coast trip as part of the new Big Ten's one that I'm entering the game feeling like it's probably a game Illinois shouldn't win, but if they can get it, it would be a marquee resume win. Excuse me, I can't talk today at all. Marquee resume win, Oregon's top 12 in the net right now, and one that would totally erase any sting from that Northwestern loss and get you ahead of schedule in terms of winning a road game that you're probably not expected to win. But it's going to be a tough game. This Oregon team is veteran. They're consistent. I mentioned it earlier, and I can get into it a little bit more, but they're just rock solid. There's no weaknesses on this Oregon team. You look at their KenPom profile, there's nothing glaring in terms of things they don't do well. There's nothing they really do at an elite level. They're a balanced team. They've got 5 guys, I believe, averaging double-digit points, between 10 and 13.2 points on this team. Just a very balanced attack. There's no star player on this team, but there's a bunch of guys that know their role. Dana Altman is a Hall of Fame caliber coach, his 15th year at Oregon. And it's just a well-coached team that's played really good basketball so far, brought a lot back from last year, supplemented it with some pieces. It's just a solid team and one that's probably not going to beat themselves. And it's a matchup that kind of scares me. A team with that type of profile that just doesn't have any glaring weaknesses and one that you know is probably going to play pretty sound veteran basketball against this younger Illinois team at home. That's one that kind of scares me. It's going to be a test for Illinois, and this Oregon team's just rock solid, but they're absolutely beatable, even though they're 9th in the country. I just don't think it's necessarily a top 10 team long term. I think it's probably more of a top 20-ish team, and that's one that Illinois should give themselves a chance to beat, and Illinois is going to have the best player on the floor. Kasparas Jakučionis is the best player in this game. What's your initial thoughts on this matchup for Illinois?
I think you hit the nail on the head. Like I was looking at the KenPom, watched some highlights earlier today, looking through the stats and roster and everything. And you kept saying solid. And that's the word I had written down. I took some notes. My main note, Oregon is a roster of 8 really solid basketball players. That kind of sums it up with a great coach too, obviously. But like this is like the formula of a team that is a lock for a Sweet 16. Like veteran guys, not a dominant score, just really a team effort. They've got depth. They go like 8 or 9, maybe even 10 deep with some guys. They've got like 5 former 5-stars on the bench, like not even getting minutes really. Super old team. Like I don't think there's a stat on KenPom which has like 40 different stats. I don't think they're top 20 in a single stat. But at the same time, they're 12-1 and could have easily been 13-0 if UCLA didn't make a 3-pointer pretty much at the buzzer.
Banked it in too.
Banked it in. Yeah, that was unbelievable. I think great wins over Alabama, great win over Texas A&M. Like it's kind of confusing why they're so good, but at the same time it's not because great coach, just veterans and guys that don't really make mistakes. They don't turn it over a ton. They also don't turn you over a ton. They get to the free throw line really well. Like they don't even shoot it super well, but they're 12-1, could be 13-0 and might win the Big Ten. So yeah, just Nate Biddle is a guy that I think he's leading them in scoring. Feels like he's been around in college forever. Kind of tries to be a stretch 5, but hasn't really had the numbers to back that up just yet, even though he takes a decent amount of attempts from 3. But he's good, just a fundamental player. He has pretty good size. Jackson Shelstad, their point guard, was supposed to kind of break out this year. A lot of the big analysts and insiders had him as a major breakout candidate. Could have been an all Big Ten player. Just hasn't really done that yet. Still a good player, don't get me wrong, but like shooting wise hasn't really done too much this year. Just not really where many people thought he would be at. TJ Bamba was supposed to be a really good transfer. He's been at a couple stops.
Illinois was after him the time before
he
was in the portal.
Or Villanova, I think. Yeah. He's shooting 27 for 72 on 2s this year. That's just a random stat I found. Like, there's a couple really good shooters. I think it's Barthélemy and Brandon Angel. They've been shooting really well from 3. But then TJ Bamba's been pretty bad. Biddle's been bad. Shelstad's been bad from 3. So overall, it's just kind of a mediocre shooting team. But I don't know. Like, the depth just makes them dangerous. They've got some good guards off the bench. I'm blanking on the guy's name. KJ Evans, I think, is a pretty good player. like it's a team that has a different leading scorer pretty much every night. So you just don't really know what you're getting individually, but you know as a team, this team's probably going to come out, give you their best effort every single night. So yeah, definitely a dangerous spot for Illinois. I can't predict a win just knowing the youth and the inconsistency from Illinois. But yeah, it should be a really fun game, I think.
Yeah, and it just feels like every Oregon box score has at least four guys in double digits and nobody over 21. Like it just that feels like
Exactly.
every
Yeah.
Oregon game, and that's why you don't have one guy to stick Kylan Boswell on and try to take him out of the game because Oregon's just so balanced. The Biddle matchup will be interesting. He's kind of just a powerful player. He's big and strong, and that's one that scares me a little bit with Tomislav Ivisic just because he has struggled. You saw against Tennessee, he was uncomfortable just with the physicality. I think bigs that have a lot of strength to them give him a little bit of trouble. I think Morez Johnson will be important in terms of just throwing some physicality on Biddle. Obviously, he'd be giving up some height, and Biddle's been very efficient around the rim this year, but we'll see how that goes. Do think it'll be important for Ivisic offensively to try and pull Biddle outside, who's very slow-footed, and to get him out of the paint. He's been a pretty good rim protector for them this year as well. Had a huge block to win one of their games early in the year. Maybe that was the Alabama game. I can't remember.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
But that'll be important. But yeah, it really, I mean, this Oregon offense, a lot of it is predicated on just getting paint touches. They've got 4 or 5 different guys that can drive and just generate paint touches for their offense, spray it out, get to the rim. They're pretty good at getting to the free throw line, top 60 in that, top 30 against high major competition and free throw rate. And that's something that Illinois is just going to have to be good on that perimeter. Your guards, Boswell, Yakachonis, Dre Gibbs-Lawhorn probably get some play, got a lot more run in that Chicago State game, had a nice little game. Those guys are going to have to be good defensively. Barthelomew's like their one elite shooter that they'll run some stuff for to get threes, and he's shooting 47%, so you'll have to find a matchup for him. He's a smaller guard at 6'1", pretty quick, and a guy you're going to have to chase around a little bit. Wonder who that matchup will be for Illinois. Shelstad, their point guard, obviously you mentioned, was kind of a preseason all-conference guy that just has struggled so far this year, but still is a guy that gets to the paint pretty efficiently and leads the team in assists. And I still expect that to probably be Kylan Boswell's matchup there because he's capable of lighting it up. So, yeah, there's not, to me, like one specific key to this game that I really highlight. It's just Illinois' got to be composed. You can't turn it over a ton on the road, obviously, and you just got to try to match the solidness of this Oregon team. You can't be erratic if you're Illinois. You can't be a team that goes in there and takes bad shots and gets flustered and lets Oregon control the pace of the game, because a veteran team like that at home should be able to take care of you if you don't go in there with the right composure and mentality. Offensive rebounding is one thing that, always is a key for Illinois, but Oregon's gettable on the offensive glass. I think Alabama had 16, Texas A&M had 21 earlier. Of course, A&M's the best in the country at offensive rebounding, but that's something that's going to be a key for Illinois. But yeah, just go in there and continue to have the guys that have played consistent basketball here recently step up and continue to do it. Kylan Boswell's playing great ball. As I drop my mic on my lap, Kylan Boswell's playing great ball recently, and you got to have him continue to play that way. KJ's got to go out there and be the best guy on the floor. For a balanced Oregon team that's probably just going to spread the wealth, if KJ goes in there with a 25-point game, that might be the difference. If you could have the guy on the floor that Oregon can't match up with. And Ivisic, who was quiet and had started to struggle just a little bit after starting off so hot, was awesome in that Chicago State game. Obviously, he was playing with middle school guys out there. That's what it looked like when he got the ball in the block. But maybe that gets him some momentum and has him have a big game here. But should be a fun one, and if Illinois can get this, and I think they should have a chance. If they shoot the ball well, you should give yourself a chance at Oregon here. It would be a heck of a resume win, but I'm with you. I'm a little skeptical about it. I'll let you start with the prediction since you've kind of tipped us off already, the way you're going.
Yeah, I can't in good faith predict a win here. I don't think Oregon, I'm with you. I don't think they're a top 10 team. The metrics might say so, but realistically, I think they're top 20-ish, like you said. I had a couple of keys to the game, and you kind of hit on them all pretty much. So I said like limit turnovers. That's kind of obvious going on a road environment. Gotta hit the glass. They got some big dudes. Biddle's a good rebounder. And then don't let them score a ton in the paint, which is, I mean, that's obvious. But I saw this stat. Let me pull it up. Sorry. I saw this stat earlier from Will Warren, who I think I mentioned him a couple weeks ago. He writes great articles about CBB. Every opponent, or I'm sorry, in Illinois' three losses and two worst defensive performances in their wins this year, every opponent has got at least 41% of their shots in the paint, and 26% of those were within 4 feet of the rim. So Big T's just got to wall up. We said Biddle's a bit of a stretch five, but that's not really his specialty. They've got a handful of other guys that get to the paint, guys that can score in the paint. So we got a wall up there. But then this is kind of my main key. I want to see the veterans, and I'm specifically looking at Trey White and Ben Hummerkaus, who've drawn a lot of criticism, kind of fairly, so far this year. It's really the second big road environment that Illinois is playing in. Sorry. I want to see the veterans, the transfers, the guys that have played in some big games. Hummerkaus hasn't really, but that's kind of besides the point. I want to see them step up. Like there's been so much that's fallen on the shoulders of KJ, Boswell too, but KJ and Big T especially, I think, especially late in games too. Like I need to see Trey White hit some shots, really lock in defensively, and I really want to see Ben Hummerkaus hit some shots. I mean, that's been the main point of our podcast. I feel like the past couple weeks, guys hitting shots, but still, I want to see those two guys get going. If they do, I could see a win. But like I've said, I think Oregon still pulls this one out at home. I'm going 73-69 Oregon. I think it's relatively low scoring. I think their defense is pretty good. Illinois' defense is still graded out really well this year through 12 or so games. So yeah, I'm going 73-69. Illinois falls to 1-2 in conference play, but no, I don't think anybody would be too pissed off about that.
No, given the fact that your first three conference games, Northwestern, Wisconsin, Oregon, I think early on in the season for this team, I think you're okay with that. Obviously, the Northwestern game would continue to hurt if you can't make it up with this one, but I still think you're in position getting this West Coast trip out of the way, and I would imagine, and we'll have another pod out before that game, but I'd imagine you can take care of a bad Washington team on Sunday to get back to 500. You'd be in fine shape. I know we've kept saying it. You mentioned it there. I feel like somebody hearing this, because I've probably said it the last two episodes, is like, just shut up already. It's not going to happen. But Ben Hummerkaus is going to hit 5 threes in a game soon. It's going to happen.
I believe it.
I know it's going to happen. He's a good shooter. He keeps shooting them. Brad Underwood is going to keep riding with him, as much as people are going to probably hate that. Unless this lasts for another month into February, expect Ben Hummerkaus to be a starter playing heavy minutes for this team, and he's going to have a big game from three. The last time he made multiple threes in a game was Arkansas on Thanksgiving. It's now New Year's Eve when this episode is released. That's pretty crazy, and it's just not going to continue. Boy, would it be huge if this was the game, where just as Oregon comes into the game thinking, boy, this Hummerkaus guy is broken. Maybe we help off him a couple times, make him hit a couple. I still don't think that'll happen, but you never know. As soon as Ben Hummerkaus kind of is giving you reason to doubt, maybe he has a big game. Boy, it would be huge if he had it in this one. If he does, that's a huge key for Illinois. And like you said, I love what you said there, just in terms of your veterans got to step up and lead in this game and keep this team composed and under control to give themselves a chance. I just think Oregon, the more experienced team at home, the travel for Illinois, I just think a lot of things are working against the Illini here. I do think Illinois will give themselves a chance late, but ultimately we've seen some late game issues for this Illinois team. And going on the road at Oregon, I just think Oregon makes a couple plays late. And my score is very similar to yours. I think it'll be Oregon 77, Illinois 73. So a little bit higher scoring, but similar margin. I think it'll be a good game, but I just got to lean with the Ducks here. If Illinois can get it, it'd be a huge one for them and would be by far their best win to date, far surpassing Arkansas or Wisconsin on the resume. What's the other? Missouri. Missouri's a quad one win, I think, but low end of quad one. This would be a certified quad one win. Illinois doesn't have like a no doubt this will be a quad one win in March yet, and this would be that. Anything else to add before we wrap it up?
I would just say that if Brad Underwood is a believer in Hummerkaus, I know he's a believer in everybody, but he told the media and the fans KJ's going to have his 20-point games after those like first three games where he took three shots a game. Guess what? He had five or six 20-point games in a row. He told us Kylan Boswell would break out. Kylan Boswell has been great the past couple weeks. He said Ben Hummerkaus is going to have his five three-pointer game. It's coming. I would believe it. I mean, we're gonna have to see it eventually in the next 20 or so games, but I believe it's coming. So let's have some faith. Enjoy the ride.
Absolutely. And yeah, we didn't necessarily focus on either of the two games that have happened since we last recorded a pod, but shout out to Kylan Boswell, triple-double on Sunday against Chicago State. That was pretty cool. Seventh triple-double in Illinois history, fifth in the Brad Underwood era. They had two in every season of basketball before Brad Underwood took over. Brad Underwood players have had five triple-doubles since he's taken over. Of course, two of those Ayo Dosunmu. You had Marcus Damask and Coleman Hawkins each have one, and now Kylan Boswell, I would have 100% told you Kasparis Yakichonis would be the first guy, if any guy on this team, to get a triple-double, which I still think he could later in the year. But Kylan Boswell getting a triple-double, obviously Chicago State is absolutely horrible, but it's just a good reflection of the play that Kylan has had recently, where he has done just a little bit of everything for this team, and he's quickly becoming one of my favorite Illini in recent memory. I just love what he brings, his toughness. It's just pure dog in that guy is what I tweeted out, because him and Merez both are just pure dog out there. You love to have guys like that. So shout out to Kylan. That was cool to see him get the triple-double on that pass to Keaton Kutcher with 2 minutes left, who buried a three for him. But we will be back after the Oregon game over the weekend to break down that big-time matchup for Illinois to restart Big Ten play and really get back into the conference season in the Big Ten as we enter the new year. Happy New Year, everybody, by the way. Make sure you drop a follow to our Twitter account at Champagne on Ice. Subscribe to the Field of 68 Podcast Network YouTube channel and find us wherever else you get your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, Google, anywhere else you can find us there. And we will talk to you after the Oregon game. And the next time we talk to you, it will be 2025. So hope everybody enjoys the new year. And we will see you next time right here on the Champagne on Ice podcast.